Good morning. I'm online. My name is Helen Fairlam. I'm the project manager for Ukrainian Crop Receipt Project. I'm here together with my colleague Taras Burhan from Lviv. You won't see him, but you'll see him later. And we're going to cover off a new development in crop receipts, which is the ability for a Ukrainian farmer to issue a crop receipt to a non-resident. But before we start, I'd like to take you through what we're going to cover off today. First of all, we're going to do a little bit of a recap on the project so we can make sure that you understand how the project has done, what has been achieved, and why you should be confident in using crop receipts. Then we're going to do a quick recap on the basics of crop receipts to make sure that, that there's a level playing field and that everybody has enough information about crop receipts. I will then ask my colleague Taras to cover off how you can use financial crop receipts with Ukrainian farmers. So how a Ukrainian farmer can issue a financial crop receipt to a non-resident. He will cover the legal foundation and the details that you need to know. And then I will cover at a high level some of the business models that you might be able to use these crop receipts for. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers. If you have any difficulties during the course of the webinar, you have contact with the administrator, and clearly you can write all your questions down. Just a quick reminder, our project is not done in isolation. IFC works together with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Ministry of Justice, and we are funded by the Swiss government. Our role is to make sure that the legislation is sufficient, sound, and all-encompassing to enable creditors and farmers to operate effectively. We're here to develop the market to make sure that there is sufficient knowledge of the different ways of working with crop receipts. And our job is to train both creditors and farmers. To date, we have undertaken extensive outreach with farmers. We've probably trained more than 30,000 farmers. Why you should be confident in using crop receipts. Crop receipts are relatively new. For some of you on the call, they will be very new. And we need to convince you that this is not a bad idea. Really, we have already had 1,000 crop receipts, although this isn't up here because 1,000 was only yesterday. And since the start of the year, we've issued crop receipts to the equivalent of $43 million. The big thing about crop receipts is that they are transparent and enforceable. Transparent means they're in the register, you can see all the crop receipts that are open. And enforceable means we have an out-of-court enforcement procedure. Clearly, a lot of people were skeptical about whether the out-of-court enforcement procedure would work, but as the slide indicates, we've had 6 cases and it has been demonstrated to work. There will be a presentation in Ukrainian later in the week or next week about lessons learned, and we will share all the materials. Just to recap as well a little bit about crop receipts, the good thing is they're not only transparent and enforceable, but they're flexible. The aim of a crop receipt is to provide a farmer with access to financing. And because there are lots of different players in the market who finance farmers, crop receipts are able to work with most people. On this slide you can see 5 different business models that a farmer could choose to use, 5 different types of partner a farmer could work with. And then the one on the bottom, international financial crop receipts, is what we're going to talk about today. Let's just recap what a crop receipt is. It's a farmer's obligation to either supply a commodity or pay money. And this obligation is unconditional. This is then backed by future crop collateral, and it's all done in a single document. It's in a flexible format, so there are obligatory fields in a crop receipt, but you can add other elements depending on your needs. It's notarized, it's in a public register, and you have out-of-court enforcement. Our take is that crop receipts embody all the best parts of the other securities people use in the market. That would be promissory notes, forward contracts, future crop collateral. When you have a crop receipt, you have two options. A commodity crop receipt, where the farmer is obliged to pay commodity, ship commodity to you, or a financial crop receipt, where the farmer obliges to pay you funds. Both are backed by a future crop pledge. In the commodity crop receipt, the volume is fixed, but you can change it to accommodate quality. In a financial crop receipt, there are options to create a formula, potentially linking the crop receipt to a foreign currency, indexing it. And this is quite important for international crop receipts when we talk going forward. I'll now hand over to my colleague Taras. You will see him, and he will walk through the next slides, taking you through what is an international crop receipt and all the legal details. You ready, Taras?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Helen, for the introduction. The only thing is, for some reason, I don't see the slides, so maybe the organizers could help us.
Yep, he doesn't see the slides. The slides are up. Da, no on ich nie видит. Okay, you don't see the slides. I'm going to tell you the number, Taras. That's a little bit tricky.
Okay, Helen, thanks.
But this is okay. This is some sort of test.
Okay, I think I can do it even this way. Okay, let's probably start with the definition. When we are using the term international crop receipts, we're referring to a crop receipt under which a non-resident is named as a creditor. It would be fair to mention that the current Ukrainian legislation does not contain such a legal term as international crop receipt. This is something that we designed for convenience purposes. But what is important is that Ukrainian legislation does not prohibit foreign legal entities or foreign individuals to be creditors on the crop receipts. Moreover, the recent regulations of the National Bank of Ukraine, which were adopted earlier this year, there was actually a package of 8 resolutions to facilitate introduction of more liberalized currency regime in Ukraine, together with or subsequent with the law on currency and currency operations, which became effective on the 7th of February. So out of this package of documents, regulations of the National Bank of Ukraine, there are 3 regulations which specifically refer to financial crop receipts in cross-border operations. For simplicity purposes, I will call them resolutions number 5, 6, and 8. We will cover the relevant provisions later, but I would like to emphasize at this stage that the most important out of these resolutions is number 5, because this resolution provides for clear grounds under which Ukrainian farmer, the debtor under the financial crop receipt, can buy foreign currency and make transfers to non-residents based on financial crop receipt. Also in this presentation, we are talking about financial crop receipts only. We are not discussing commodity crop receipts because the regulation is not full, is not sufficient yet, and certain amendments are expected by the National Bank of Ukraine, the Fiscal Service, and by the Customs Service of Ukraine in order to facilitate introduction of commodity crops receipts in cross-border transactions. So for now, today we are talking only about financial crop receipts, because these crop receipts became a reality in cross-border transactions now. As I mentioned, the resolution number 5 provides for legal grounds to purchase foreign currency and transfer foreign currency or to make payments to creditors on the financial crop receipts. Actually, there are three, we can say that there are three documents or three main group of documents that are needed to be supplied to the bank. Number one is contract under which crop receipt is issued. Number two is notarized financial crop receipt itself, financial crop receipt itself, its notarized copy, plus extracts from relevant registers. And finally, the third set of documents which is needed is proof, evidence that credit, either in monetary form or in goods, was supplied by a resident creditor to a Ukrainian farmer. So let's look at each of these elements in more detail. Let's start with the contract. So basically, the law does not define which contract this should be, right? The regulations of the National Bank of Ukraine say, for their purposes, say that contract under which crop receipt is issued. This basically leaves enough room to develop different business models and use different types of contracts. First of all, this could be a loan agreement from a non-resident creditor to a Ukrainian farmer, under which funds, money are provided. Also, it could be a supply contract under which non-resident seller supplies or sells goods on credit with a deferred payment to a Ukrainian farmer. It also can be even a forward contract. We will talk about this possibility separately. In the contract under which crop receipt will be issued, it is advisable to have a special clause, let's call it financial crop receipt clause, which would exactly specify that crop receipt shall be issued and for what purpose. Actually, there are two capacities in which crop receipt can be issued. We call them issuance of crop receipt as a security or issuance of crop receipt as instrument of payment. What this means? If you are using crop receipt as an instrument of payment, for instance, in the loan agreement, this means that your loan agreement basically says that the loan, interest, and other payments under the loan agreement will be repaid by the farmer by making payments under the crop receipt. So money are coming to Ukraine under the loan agreement, but are being returned or repaid under the financial crop receipt. In this scenario, we call that crop receipt is used in its capacity as an instrument of payment. Same could be done for supply contract. The contract provides that payment for goods will be done by making payments under the crop receipt. The second scenario, second capacity in which crop receipt can be used is as a security. This means that originally under your contract, the Ukrainian resident has an obligation to make payment under the contract itself, but in parallel with the contract, the crop receipt is issued and it has been held by the non-resident, by the creditor, as an extra security. So if there is an event of default under the contract, the creditor has a chance to decide, shall I enforce under the contract, loan agreement or supply contract, or maybe shall I use my crop receipt, which is an independent obligation, conditional, as Helen has already mentioned, which is secured by pledge over future crops, and which provides for fast-track, out-of-cost enforcement. In your contract, it is important to specify in which capacity the crop receipt is issued in this financial crop receipt clause. Also, it is advisable to have an annex to your agreement in which provide the agreed form and substance of the crop receipt that will be issued by a Ukrainian farmer, so that there are no additional negotiations or surprises when the crop receipt will need to be actually issued, because typically there is a difference in time when between the time when the main agreement for supply of goods or supply of credit is signed and when the financial crop receipt is issued and properly documented. The next element of the transaction is the crop receipt itself. I will not cover all of the specific fields that are provided by law for the financial crop receipts here in this presentation, but let me briefly mention a few of them which may have specific importance or actually be a bit different in terms of in a cross-border transaction. First of all, the crop receipt must specify the details of the contract under which crop receipt is issued, naming the contract itself, its date, number, parties to the contract, and also in which capacity crop receipt was issued, as a collateral, as a security, or as an instrument of payment. Secondly, it is important to define where the obligation by the farmer shall be fulfilled. Shall the repayment take place outside of Ukraine? So shall the farmer pay the creditor to the creditor's bank account, say in London, or shall the repayment be made to the creditor's bank account opened with the Ukrainian bank? Recent currency legislation of Ukraine gives a possibility to non-resident creditors, to non-residents actually, open current accounts with Ukrainian banks, both in foreign currency and in local currency, hryvnia, and accept certain payments to such accounts, including payments under the crop receipts. Although it is not necessary to mention the bank account details itself in the crop receipt, it might be a good option, especially if in a particular case there are no plans for endorsement. By endorsement, I mean transfer of the rights with respect to the financial crop receipt from the initial creditor to some other creditor. So if there are no plans for and it is clear from the outset of the transaction that the repayment will be done to the initial creditor, its bank account, its specific bank account can be specified in the crop receipt itself. If there are chances for endorsement, probably better avoid filling out this information, because at the stage of enforcement, it will be extra step will be needed, amendments to the crop receipt. Also, in the crop receipt itself, you can regulate should there be endorsement or not. So basically, the law leaves it up to the parties to decide. There could be complete prohibition, or there could be unlimited opportunity to endorse to anyone, or it could be limited opportunity. For instance, financial crop receipt can be endorsed only to another non-resident, or can be endorsed only to resident, or only to legal entity, depending, or maybe only to the member of the group. So it's up to the parties to decide which condition for future potential transfer of crop receipt should be there. Finally, as we have mentioned, the crop receipt provides for outsourced enforcement based on notarial read, but the law does not prohibit in the text of the crop receipt itself also opt for arbitration or even jurisdiction of foreign courts. Ukraine is a party to New York Convention for recognition and enforcement of arbitral awards. So maybe in some instances, arbitral award could be even better option than notarial read. Speaking about court judgments from other countries, Ukraine typically also recognizes and gives a possibility to enforce foreign court judgments, either if there is an agreement between Ukraine and the other country for such enforcement, or on the principle of reciprocity. Speaking about the language of the crop receipt, it should be issued in Ukrainian language. But the law also provides for the possibility to have crop receipt translated into foreign language. Let's say English or any other language chosen by the parties. For these purposes, translation should be done, written translation should be done by a certified translator, and the signature of the translator should be notarized at the same time when the crop receipt itself is notarized. And there are options how basically it can look like. So if we have, let's say, Ukrainian and English language, it could be a 2-column document, Ukrainian and English, or it could be text in Ukrainian language, and then on the back, text in English. Creditors have to show up, both farmer and creditor have to show up to the notary's office for the documentation, for the purposes of issuance of crop receipt, and they should bring relevant documents to the notary. The foreign creditor should provide the notary with, first of all, if we are talking about legal entity, the foreign creditor should provide extract from the trade, commercial or bank register from its country. Also, since this is a legal entity, it will be represented by an individual who should present its passport and confirm that he or she has relevant authority to bind non-resident creditor. This could be either power of attorney or other documents evidencing that this person has authority to sign on behalf of legal entity. In case of an individual creditor, this should be just passport, and if such person is represented by proxy, then also a power of attorney. Documents from other countries, in order to be recognized and admitted in Ukraine, need to be properly authenticated. They can be either legalized or apostilled or notarized, depending on country from which these documents are coming from. For instance, if we are talking about documents from the United States of America, United Kingdom, Switzerland, France, Israel, such documents must be apostilled, and once apostilled, translated into Ukrainian, translation properly certified, then these documents are admissible. Documents from other countries like China, Saudi Arabia, Jordan needs to be legalized. It's more complicated procedure. This basically means that the documents should go to the consular department of the Ukrainian embassy in that particular country for special stamping before they arrive to Ukraine. And also there are some countries with which Ukraine has very easy regime for admission of documents. If the documents are properly notarized in that country, then they are admissible in Ukraine. And examples of such countries are Poland, Czech Republic, and some states, some Baltic states. Speaking about the procedure for issuance of the crop receipt, the crop receipt is subject to notarization. This is done by the notary at the notary's office. Also, it is subject to recordation in the crop receipt register. We have a special register which contains information about issued crop receipts. And once registered, this ensures validity of the crop receipt. So from that moment, the crop receipt becomes valid. And also, the third element that should be done at the stage of issuance of crop receipt, it's registration or recordation with the Register of Encumbrances of a movable property, because the crop receipts, one of element of the crop receipt is pledge of future crops. And in order to ensure priority of creditors' claims, such pledge should be information about such pledge should be entered into encumbrances register. At present, unfortunately, presence of both parties, the debtor and the creditor, at the notary's office is needed in order for procedures related to issuance and recordation of crop receipts. Foreign creditor can be, as mentioned, can be represented by proxy, who's basically tasked at the stage without an application for registration of pledge and to accept original of issued crop receipt. So the next slide and the next set of documents which are important and will be needed for purposes of purchase foreign currency is proof that actually the creditor supplied credit to Ukrainian farmer. So this is like the first step, because without credit, without actual credit, no payments on the international financial crop receipt are possible. So if we are talking about loan agreement, then we are talking about money. So if money are given to a Ukrainian farmer, then this should be evidenced by bank certificates confirming actually crediting of funds to the farmer's bank account. If we are talking about supply of goods under the import contract, then such documents are customs declarations confirming import of relevant goods to the farmer so that the goods arrived on the territory of Ukraine. The law also provides for the foreign creditor to provide not only actually products or not only goods, but also services and even objects of intellectual property, and in exchange receive crop receipts and be paid under the crop receipts. So if this type of values are given, work, services, objects of intellectual property, then the relevant confirming documents that actually these were provided are transfer acceptance acts or other documents specified in the contract. Speaking about the loan agreements and mechanics of payment, it is important to remember that for now, if we are talking about loans and credits which provide for interest, they should arrive from the creditor's bank's account outside of Ukraine in foreign currency. If we are talking about interest-free loans, in Ukraine, Ukrainian legislation is using the term refundable financial aid. Such funding can be provided from the creditor's accounts opened with Ukrainian bank, either in hryvnia or in foreign currency. Funds received by farmer in foreign currency are subject to mandatory conversion into local currency, into hryvnia. At present, today, actually, if the farmer would receive payment or credit, 50% would immediately be converted same day would immediately be converted into hryvnia. Starting from 1st of March, this ratio is decreased to 30%. Loans and credits from non-residents, or actually agreements for provision of loans and credits by non-residents to residents under the general rule is subject to notification to the National Bank of Ukraine and entry into the special system, electronic system, loans from non-residents. But with respect to transactions involving financial crop receipts, there is an exemption. If crop receipt is being issued under such agreement, then transaction is exempt from notification. Also, in the past, for loans and credits, we had so-called maximum interest rate cap. It has been abolished for now, but still there are some guidances provided by the National Bank of Ukraine that that if certain limits are exceeded, and this is totally subject to the opinion of the servicing bank, which is servicing the transaction, then additional documents might be needed to be provided by the farmer in order for the bank to verify if basically this transaction is not between related parties and is not used for channeling of funds out of Ukraine. Next slide, I guess, because I don't see the slides, I guess that the next slide is about endorsement. Again, the endorsement is a transfer of the financial crop receipt from the initial creditor to a subsequent creditor. It can be for free, it can be for monetary compensation, right? Unless the crop receipt does not provide any limitations for such transfers. In order to accomplish such transfer, basically on the original of the crop receipt, a special inscription is made, inscription assigned, and also a name of the new creditor. Endorsement, the procedure for endorsement is very similar for the procedure of the initial issuance of the crop receipts. So basically, both parties, initial creditor and subsequent creditor, need to show up at the office of the notary. The notary notarizes inscription assigned, and also which is signed by the initial creditor, and also relevant updates are being done to the entries in the registers, in the crop receipt register and in the encumbrances register. Again, since we are talking about non-residents, potential non-residents showing up at the notary's office, they should arrive with a set of duly authenticated, translated documents. Ukrainian legislation does not contain limitations to whom endorsement can be done. So basically, non-resident creditor can either endorse it to another non-resident, or even can endorse it to a resident of Ukraine. Such transaction, of course, may have some specifics, because if the initial crop receipt between resident and non-resident was in foreign currency and it has been assigned to another resident, then two residents are prohibited from making payments in foreign currency. So the crop receipt should provide, it is advisable that the crop receipt should provide for specific formula or rate, exchange rate that should be used in order to convert foreign currency into hryvnia if the payment on the financial crop receipt will, because of endorsement, will be made to another resident of Ukraine. It could be at the rate of the National Bank of Ukraine. It could be at the rate of some private bank. It's up to the parties to decide, but it is recommended that information in the crop receipt. Also, potentially, even domestic crop receipts, and by the term domestic, I mean crop receipts which were initially issued by a farmer to a local creditor. Such crop receipts can also be assigned to non-residents. I think that the next slide shows possible scenario or possible model when, let's say, a dealer is receiving a crop receipt from the farmer, financial crop receipt from the farmer, endorses such crop receipt to its supplier, to its non-resident supplier, and most likely there is some kind of compensation between next creditor, assignee and assignor of the crop receipt. Then the farmer is making payment under the crop receipt, and since this was initially a domestic crop receipt, it had to be expressed in local currency, so it was in hryvnia. For these purposes, in order to accept payment from the farmer, non-resident creditor, subsequent to resident creditor, will need to open a current account with the Ukrainian bank, receive payment from the farmer under the financial crop receipt, and buy foreign currency and transfer funds to its account outside of Ukraine. And of course, once the crop receipts, obligation under the crop receipts are fulfilled by the farmer, the creditor needs to return crop receipt back to the farmer. Enforcement. As we mentioned before, crop receipts provide for out-of-court speed enforcement. So what this means? This means that the creditor, if there is an event, the creditor chance to go to the notary, provide certain documents, the crop receipt itself, and evidence that no payment was done, and obtained some inscription, which is called notarial read. And with this inscription, the crop receipt becomes an enforceable document. So step, the creditor goes to the bailiff, either state bailiff or private bailiff. The bailiff opens enforcement procedures, finds collateral, collateral is arrested, sold through the auctions for hryvnia, and in the context of international properties, the bailiffs are now allowed to buy foreign currency and or make transfers to non-resident creditors. It is important to remember that basically the list of documents that would need to be provided by the non-resident the bailiff in order to buy foreign currency actually is the same as would be for the farmer. So basically, the bailiff should write original contract under which crop receipt was issued, notarized copy of the crop receipt, extract from the crop receipt register, and also proof of that credit was provided to the farmer. So it is important to remember that during the life of the transaction, all of these documents must be accumulated and safeguarded by the creditor in order to be able to use them at the enforcement for purposes of purchase of foreign currency and making transfers outside of Ukraine. So finally, let me also brief some aspects of taxation, because as a general rule, non-residents' income derived from Ukrainian sources is subject to taxation by withholding tax. The general rule is that the rate of tax is 15%, but it can be decreased to some lower percentage if there is a treaty or bilateral agreement between Ukraine and the country from which the non-resident creditor is coming on avoidance of double taxation. So typically such treaties provide for lower rates, say 5 or 10%, if we are talking about interest, which are most likely applicable in case of payments under the loan agreement or payments of credit under the consumer credit, and also in case of endorsement, when non-resident endorses crop receipt to another non-resident. A stage of the farm, also the farmer would actually, the Ukraine makes resident liable for withholding and transfer to the state budget of the tax. So this is actually up to the farmer to withhold the tax, make the payment, decide which rate is applicable, 15%, or if there are grounds to decrease the rate under the bilateral agreement. And for this purpose, cooperation with the creditor or of the creditor would be important, because certain documents might need to be provided from the creditor's country. Evidence its, for instance, status at that country. Helen, I think I covered my part of presentation. Maybe you would like to speak about the models.
I would just like you to cover off something you covered off with the team, if that's possible, about splitting between principal and tranches for interest. Just a couple of words.
Yes.
Would that be okay?
Yes, okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Actually, this is very, very important principle, because the law, the currency law provides that if the creditor did not fulfill its obligation in full, then the amount of currency that can be purchased under the financial crop receipt and transferred to the non-resident should be equal to what the farmer received. So let's look at this at the example. Let's say we have a loan agreement under which $100 had to be provided by the creditor to the farmer. But for some reason, the creditor only provided $50. 6 or 9 months later, the farmer wants to buy foreign currency and make repayment. Logically, this amount should also include interest and maybe some other payments, penalties, or whatever is calculated according to the formula. However, if the creditor did not fulfill its obligations in full, the farmer would be only able to buy the same amount which was actually received. And for these purposes, because there is this rule, for these purposes, we would advise that if your particular transaction involves supply of money or supply of goods, interest, then it would be probably wise to have crop receipts issued for a particular tranche. So instead of issuing one crop receipt for 100 in our example, issue a crop receipt for a particular installment, 50, and this way, if documentation is carefully and properly drafted, the creditor would be allowed to receive even partially provided credit back with interest, whatever other compensation is in the formula.
Thank you. I think that was quite important. So if I move on very quickly, and just to remind you of the 3 models that Taras mentioned at the beginning of his part of the presentation. 3 different ways you can work with financial crop receipts: resident, non-resident. One is a forward contract and a financial crop receipt issued to support any advance payment that's been made against that forward contract. So that would be ideal for traders. You could have an import contract and a financial crop receipt as security against that import. So, for example, someone would like to supply a combine to a farmer. He could use a financial crop receipt as a guarantee for payment, in other words, in simple words. Or, as we've discussed, a loan agreement between a farmer and a bank or an investor, and a financial crop receipt to support that loan agreement. And I apologise for the blue box on the bottom. I must have forgotten to put the words in last night. If we just look, and I think there are 3 models we'll run through quickly. None of them are rocket science, and I think that's good because this just proves how easy it is to work with crop receipts. If we take, I'm a trader, I would like to have a forward to the customer would like to get an advance payment to help his sowing. This is a standard business issue. I don't know the customer well, I would like some security. You could sign a forward contract with a farmer, CPT port. The farmer could issue a financial crop receipt to the value of the prepayment specified in the contract. You could then make the prepayment. The farmer delivers his crop, you then make the outstanding payment, and you return the farmer the crop receipt. In the event the farmer doesn't perform, you can use the crop receipt to return your prepayment. I clearly understand that we're not talking about covering mark to market, we're not enforcing delivery of tonnage, but I think this is a good start. Likewise, if I were a supplier of equipment, you could have a contract with a farmer direct. The farmer could issue a financial crop receipt to the value of the contract, maybe a repayment calculation linked to the foreign exchange rate in the contract, all sorts of stuff. After harvest, the farmer could purchase foreign exchange and pay you for the equipment, and you return the crop receipt. In the event there is no performance of the contract, you can enforce against the crop receipt. And I think this is great because this enables suppliers of equipment to make direct sales on competitive terms. Farmers love to buy equipment and it's rather expensive. This might work, yeah? Also the loan agreement that we talked about several times. A bank or an investor can have a loan agreement with a farmer. The farmer can issue a financial crop receipt to fulfill or secure the loan. The funds are transferred to the farmer, and the farmer makes his obligatory sale of currency. Yeah? The farmer can purchase and remit currency to the creditor after harvest, and the crop receipt is returned. Let's remember the 2 things that Taras advised us about. Split your payments and your crop receipts. So do a crop receipt for every tranche of payment to make sure that you can claim back your interest, and split your principal and interest. Because remember, your interest is taxable. I'm afraid this slide has come out a little bit wincy writing, so we'll improve it when we get back to the office. But if we just want to recap, what do you need to remember about doing financial crop receipts? Yeah, you need to know your counterparty, standard stuff. And this is always, what we say, your crop receipt is as good as your counterparty. You need to understand your internal processes, what you're going to do if something goes wrong, what's your plan B, how do you enforce? And obviously you need to understand the process of endorsement, and that the previous creditor can be jointly liable unless otherwise stated in the endorsement process. We just run through that a little bit. When we endorse from one counterparty to a next, standard terms that you're jointly liable unless you state otherwise. It's the initial issuer who can be enforced in a out-of-court process. All other processes go through court. And I think I've got a few top tips for doing international crop receipts. The power of attorney has to be all-encompassing. You don't want to be running around reissuing powers of attorney at the last moment. Make it cover everything, make your life easier. I've put in here, make payments and deliveries against contract, not financial crop receipt, but I suspect Taras and I would have to discuss that again. There are different takes on that, but this is the beginning of the process. Ensure that your loan agreement and contract clearly define the interest and principal, split them out for taxation reasons. Remember what Taras said, only the amount paid can be enforced, not interest and penalties if the whole contract hasn't been completed. Yeah? And only on full completion can interest be charged and enforced. Therefore, think about your steps and think about how the process is going to work. If I'm honest, I think it's simple, I think it's straightforward. I think the results of the project today demonstrate that farmers understand crop receipts, and therefore I think for you as creditors who are investing in Ukraine, this is a good opportunity to access new markets, work with new customers, but also to secure what you're doing. Thank you.